initiating program of our new space, so our new platform that Zilberman has started here at the Goethestraße. As some of you might know, we moved the main gallery over to Zilberstraße, and we wanted to make this into a space for collaborations, for meetings, to do video screenings and performances, and yeah, just to have also a place where we could have talks and drink a glass of wine, do things like this. So this initiating program, Instances of Erasure, consists of 8 artists, 8 multidisciplinary artists, and we arrange meetings with curators and institutions to talk about their work. And the talk tonight is going to be between Itamar Gov and Zippora elders. Itamar Gov, he did his solo show, his first solo show here at the gallery. We just have the new catalogue, it just came out, so please have a look at it. He's also a cross-disciplinary artist, a conceptual artist, often heavily researches his works, and has just won a very nice special talent prize in Italy. Has an exhibition now at Martatoio in Rome. I don't want to say too much about the work because I think it will be discussed later, but I do want to introduce also our guest, Zippora Elders, who is now standing there. She's the head of the curatorial department and outreach of Goethestraße. She's also an independent curator and writer, formerly at Sonsbeek and Kunstvoort Vijfhuizen near Amsterdam, where she transformed this UNESCO heritage into a place for contemporary art and ecological exchange. So we're very honored, very happy to have them both here. So maybe we can do a round of applause.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you for inviting me as well. It's very nice to see you again in real. We had conversations from you were in Milan. Yeah, so from some kind of bar where you were maybe in preparation of this. Yes, it's a great honor to be invited for this, and especially to talk about this work, because I think it's the most personal, directly personal to me. So every time I see it, and I've seen it now quite a few times, I'm very moved by it. And so, yeah, it's a very special and beautiful work. So thank you for that to start with. Would you elaborate further what it is about and how it came together?
Yeah. So first, thanks everyone for coming. And Zippora, thank you so much for being here. And Marilyn and Lotte for the organization, everything. Yeah, so this is actually maybe the first, let's say, official work that I did. And it came about, it took a few years ago. The sister of my grandmother passed away, and they found this box in her house with all these more than 200 letters. And as I'm a bit the one in the family that everything that's being found, they give to, I always tell them, don't throw anything, just whatever it is. Even if it doesn't look interesting, just give it to me and I will do something with it. Even if it's like just keep it somewhere, but just don't throw it. So I received this box, without really knowing what it was, but the thing that was wrapping all of them said letters to Shevik. And so at the beginning I also didn't realize that they were all written after she was already dead. But when I started to read them very quickly, it became very clear. I mean, so this is my great-grandfather, and he died when I was 3. So it's not that I really have very elaborate memories of him. I have some brief moments that I remember. So it was very clear that he was writing some sort of, it is some sort of a diary actually, just that he's writing to another person and not about himself. It was also clear that he's writing it probably for someone in the future to read, because he's explaining some things that don't make sense to explain if he's talking to his wife. Like our 2 wonderful daughters, Tsipa and Elisa, and you don't need to explain that they are your daughters. So it was very interesting for me to just go over these letters and realizing that it was some sort of letters for someone else in the future to somehow read, to learn about his life. It was this is of course a very narrow selection of like pieces of letters. The letters are also very repetitive. It's very, like he's mentioning things really every day, like what he was eating, the walks that he was taking. It's a very depressing reading of the letters. And slowly it was something that, like, I was just confronted with many questions that I didn't really consider before of old age, of something like he was in what we would all really hope to be in. So he became more than 90 without diseases, in a house of his own. He was able to, he was eating, he had everything was okay. It's really like the hope of every person. And he was so depressed and so bored of life. And my reaction to it was very emotional, also because he keeps mentioning different family members that are today still alive, that I grew up with. So it was a very strange, I feel like it's a very strange dialogue with this person that is not here, that is talking to a dead person himself, but that somehow I am involved in this conversation. And so very slowly I was trying to think what to do with those letters, and the fact that his voice is so obviously present in all of them, but I cannot hear the voice. So it's something that I was thinking to myself, what can be done with these things? So the idea of somehow creating these letters be existing in time, that it's not like an object that you can decide how quickly you go through, but that you will have the pace of an actual speaking person, and you cannot hear the person speaking. It's something that I was thinking that I wanted to create this realm of something that is completely in between everything. Like there is a very present voice, but there is no voice. There is like a still object like letters, but it's happening in time. It was something that I was trying to somehow bring together, and to, in a certain way, make present also the boredom or the monotonic situation that he was in. So there is a bit of like, for me, every time I watch it, there are some moments that I'm thinking, okay, like I understood already, like what's happening, but at the same time it was important for me to keep this feeling of a bit of heaviness and of boredom, in the sense of, okay, but there is another day, and there is another day, and there is another day. So, yeah, these were all the things that somehow came together and led to this.
How long did you work on this?
So
What age were you when you got this?
So I got it in 2018. So I was 29.
Yeah, I'm asking about your age because it's a generational.
Yeah.
That's the life.
He died in '92. I was 3, and his daughter Aliza died in 2018, and this is when I got the box. And then for 3 years I was a bit like transcribing a bit, translating a bit because all the letters are in Hebrew, without really knowing what to do with them. It was not like I had an idea, but slowly it became interesting for me to think of them happening in time. I don't really know how to say it better, but to imagine how they can be presented with some sort of a duration. And so, yeah, it was a very slow process that,
Can you say something about the life of your great-grandfather?
Yeah, he had a very interesting life. He was born in Cairo to a Ukrainian family that immigrated there in the end of the 19th century. So he grew up between Cairo and Alexandria. And then when he was 20, he went to Palestine, to Tel Aviv, and stayed there. He was a very poetic person. He was writing a lot of poetry. He was like an art critic where there was no such a thing as any art to critique. He liked very much the whole thing of writing, of elaborating ideas, of bringing together different worlds. He was a very sweet and smart person that I think was annoying to most of the people around him because he really had a lot to say the whole time. He was very, like the memory of my father is of him being just this very, very sweet, very knowledgeable person. And of my mother is that he is like this nagging old person, annoying, known as the patients to sit next to because it's a nightmare to listen to him.
Because your grandmother is Zippora or...
Zippora is my grandmother, the mother of my father, yeah.
And does it come from Zippora?
Yes,
Okay.
maybe it's Zippora. Yes.
I think you mentioned it, but sometimes I was wondering again.
Yeah.
And you also just mentioned it, and we talked about it, that you are the one in the family who gets the stuff that otherwise would be thrown away.
Yeah.
It reminds me very much actually of the work of a curator. I mean, traditionally, the ones who kind of care for things, but also you're of course also an artist who then makes it into something.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And also I started after my university to work in curatorial projects, not as an artist. So it's something that was always very natural to me to collect materials and to somehow understand what to do with them. And this was, as I said, really the first work, let's say, as an artist, in a sense that the idea was not to take the materials I found and to present them, but to use them as some sort of a starting point for something that is completely separate from them, actually.
Yeah, I find it interesting because when we talk about the history of curators, let's say, in the 19th century when museums, as we know them, started, they are actually the ones who display in the way that the knowledge systems of that moment are accepted the more.
Definitely, yeah.
But your work, of course, is actually the other way around. You kind of challenge the norms, you challenge the boundaries, and you turn it into something new. And at the same time, there are these displays of stones, for example, or the lemons, the citrus.
No, I like very much to play with these forms because they are so established and so they are so also recognizable and they are so easily understood, like visually even. So I like in most of my works, I enjoy very much to take these very obvious forms and then to use the fact that whoever is looking at them knows exactly what they are, at least has some preconceptions of what to expect, and then it's an amazing opportunity to play with it and to ruin a bit the expectation.
Maybe we can make a step to the exhibition that you showed here in spring.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone has seen it, but maybe you can explain a little bit, or here, I mean, as a gallery, how you showed it.
I will try to be very short. So the exhibition here was, the title was Chemistry and Physics in the Household, and it came from a lecture of Dr. Clara Immerwahl in 1901. She was a chemist, the first woman in Germany to get a PhD, to become a doctor. And she was giving this lecture that when I came across this like a small ad in a newspaper that was advertising her lecture, Chemium Physicium Haushalt, that I just found absurd, and I couldn't imagine what she could possibly have talked about in such a lecture just by the title. So I was very curious to understand who she was or what exactly was the content of this lecture. And so her life story was that she married a fellow chemist and was very quickly pushed into the role of a housewife. So her laboratory was taken away from her, and she lost her position in the university, and she got pregnant, and this whole thing was very, very quick. And her husband was working on the development of field fertilizers, and then realized that with his chemical knowledge he's actually able to create something that will kill many, many people, and he was very excited about it. And he is actually the inventor of chemical weapons, so he invented the gas weapons that were used in the First World War. And Clara Immerwahl is what seems like some sort of a reaction to his first successful test of these chemical weapons in Belgium. They were living in Dahlem in Berlin, and she went in front of their house and shot herself and killed herself as some sort of a protest against what chemical knowledge is being used to kill people instead of helping the world, in a sense. And this thing of following something that is like an invention that is clearly destructive, but still the person is excited about it because it means fame and money and a better position. He got the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for his invention. This difficulty or this clash between something that is morally clearly wrong, but still the will to create, to go further, to be part of a progress, to invent, is something I got very interested in, and I started to follow different lines that are living like from this incident or story of Immerwahl and her husband. And very quickly I got into like alchemical recipes for different experiments and different inventions, that all have to do with like the invention of something that is bigger and more powerful than humans somehow. Like the idea of creating a person that is stronger than a real person, the idea of Frankenstein, the Sandman of Hoffman, the perfect woman that is so perfect that in the end it's clear that she's actually some sort of a robot. This whole obsession that Europeans mostly had in the past 200 years with the perfection of the body and progress and innovation, even though, while knowing that it's destructive, I mean, actually it leads to devastation. And so I created this very complex on-purpose diagram that supposedly presents the history of this thing, of like innovation and ethics that are somehow clashing with each other, trying to make it clear that it's not as easy to separate events as we would like to separate them, for example. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking of an example of Werner von Braun, that was an SS officer that was the head of the missile program of the Nazis. And then in the 50s moved to the US and he was the founder of the space program of the United States. And he was speaking in the 50s about the colonization of Mars. He was leading the whole mission to go to the moon. So the idea of things that are, how we read history of like, this is bad, this is good, this person is bad, this person is good, this progress is good and this progress is bad, is something that was trying somehow to tackle and to mesh in a way that would make it clear that it's impossible to really separate these things. And the exhibition had different installations that were mostly immersive, I would say, or at least in a sense that you would walk between them or around them, you would become part of the situation. That all of them are somehow taking many different elements from all these incidents and moments and figures and objects that they found while looking for these moments of innovation and ethics that are clashing. So it was different situations in which you're not learning about history, but you're somehow becoming part of a certain situation that you're not maybe completely sure what it is. It sounds maybe very abstract when there is no reference, but there were like a room full of very big cocoons that were hands from the or like some sort of a very big surgical table with many different body pieces made of plaster. There was a bionic sheep, some sort of like a robot, evil but sweet sheep that is looking from the window.
Everything was also white, more or less.
Yeah,
except for the metal.
The colors were very much silver, white, and dark blue, Prussian blue. That also in a very strange way became very clear while looking for all these moments in European history that Prussian blue, the color, the pigment, was very central in many completely crazy moments in a very strange and bizarre way. So Prussian blue was also very present.
When we go to the surgery table, there were elements of body parts, as you say, but they're actually parts of statues, not all limbs, but also it relates to statues. Which makes me also think of the work that's now on show in Kunsthalle. Later CCTV.
Yes.
These are also statues quite later, but would you like to tell about this 16-channel video installation?
Yeah, so now I have an exhibition in Mannheim in the Kunsthalle, and it's a video work of 16 channels, so it's a wall with 16 screens, which is called Brecker CCTV. And the whole thing there started with, so usually as maybe it's clear now, usually I start with some sort of a strange object that I find or some sort of a detail that I find very interesting and I'm trying to follow to understand where it can lead me. And in this case it was this list that was called the Gottbegnadeten-Liste, so the God-gifted, the list of the God-gifted, that was composed in 1944, and it's a list of artists that the Nazi regime perceived as essential to the Nazi culture. So living artists in those years that practically designed what is Nazi aesthetics. And they were given commissions to fill the public square of Germany with their artworks. And so I got to this list that for me, I just found it very interesting and completely crazy that in '44, which is the peak of the crazy war, they had the idea of making this list. And I found it very interesting. I also found it very crazy that Georg Kolbe is in second place in this list. That I really had no idea. I mean, not that I was really looking into his life, but I was a bit surprised because there is the Georg Kolbe Museum, there is the Georg Kolbe. He's very present. There is the park after him. So I was a bit confused, and I was very curious to understand a bit more, and mostly about what's left from all these sculptures that were filling the German public sphere. And more than 300 of these sculptures that were realized and placed in the streets between 33 and 45, so more than 300 of them are still standing where they were standing when they were first put there. And many of them are of naked figures, of naked men and women that are anonymous, so it's not a commemoration for one specific general or anything like, or historical figure, but they are some sort of an anonymous depiction of the German soul or the Aryan race, like something that is very much the idea of what the essence of the German people is. And so I found it interesting, the fact that because Germany, the public space in Germany is very well curated in a sense, like that it's not by accident that someone decided to keep something or to take something away. It's clear that things that had like swastikas on them are not there anymore. And I found it very interesting that it was decided, probably again and again and again and again since 45, that these sculptures are not dangerous in a sense, that they should not be taken away, because in a certain way they are not Nazi enough to be taken away or to be ruined. And I find it very interesting. I find it very interesting that the idea that it was decided repeatedly that they are not dangerous enough to be taken away. Without saying like, no, but clearly these are Nazi sculptures that should be ruined or they should be taken away. I find it, that the point is that it was decided that they are not dangerous. And the idea of the work was somehow to create this surveillance room that is surveilling these statues all around Germany. Because another thing I found very interesting is because each of them now belongs to the local municipality. If someone is spraying them, for example, it's the responsibility of the municipality to clean them. They need to maintain them because it's part of the city's property. So the idea was to create this security room that surveils these sculptures, which means to make sure on both sides that no one is doing anything to them, because if someone is doing them, it means we need to clean them or to do something, fix them. And on the other hand, to make sure that they are not becoming dangerous in a way, like that they're not doing something unexpected. So the whole thing, it was coinciding with this story of this German prince, like in December last year, that it was discovered that he had a plan to take over the country and to do a revolution, that he already chose the cook for the king for after the revolution. And everyone treated him as a clown. And also this I found very interesting actually, like that it's so obviously a joke. That, like, is it really so funny? Or is it, no, that's not the right question. Is he really so harmless? Yeah. And so to me, somewhere in my mind it made sense to like supposedly making sure that they are not becoming dangerous, like that it's not so obvious that they are so harmless. These athletic, very muscular men and women that are like looking to the future and are, I don't know, imagining their victory over the world, I don't know. And so the idea was to create this work, and I chose 16 of them that are really spread all over Germany. And the setting in the room is actually making everyone who is entering into the room into some sort of a security person, because you find yourself, even if you don't want to, suddenly just standing in front of this wall of screens, and because we know this form of CCTV, and we know that it's used in order to find threats or danger, so when you stand in front of them, you a bit, without even wanting to, you're starting to try to understand what is the threat. Like you're starting to start looking a bit, trying to understand what is the problem here that I should be looking at. And it starts very objective, very neutral, and slowly the cameras are losing a bit their objectivity. They're getting closer and closer, and they're a bit losing like their function. They're not really doing what they are supposed to do, which is to just be like static and to make sure that everything is okay. So they're a bit falling into, not falling in love, that's a bit exaggerated, but a bit falling into these bodies that can be still perceived as some sort of an ideal of beauty. Like these bodies are not different from what we see in commercials of what is a beautiful body. So yeah, so the idea is that it's always this thing, a bit of jumping between, I know that these are evil because they are Nazi, but why are they evil? They're just naked people, they're not standing there with a swastika. And this is some sort of an ideal of beauty, so it's beautiful, but actually it's an evil ideal of beauty, so I shouldn't think that it's beautiful. So it's this idea of...
Why do I think?
Or why do I think, exactly, yeah. So it's this theme of a bit being confronted with the first reactions that we have to looking at these colors that I thought was interesting to play with, to experiment with.
And I think the three installations or presentations we've now been talking about, I think there's something you do with the viewer, isn't it? So in this case, they always come, you or you become part of it, maybe a little bit responsible or not. It's strange, so with becoming a guard, of course, gives you some kind of agency or power, but at the same time you are leading the cameras. And then also with this, with your great-grandfather, you're also kind of, I mean, I felt also like, am I supposed to know this, to read this, or to be part of knowing this? And then also with the show, you wonder, is this like a crime scene? Is it a laboratory?
Exactly,
is this in the past? Is this in the future?
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe actually also think, you came to Germany in 2010 to study.
Yeah.
How did you make this decision? Because now you're kind of in German history also because of how you work, your interest, you stumble upon things because you live here. So how did this come about 13 years ago?
In general, to decide this was, so I was always a bit excited or curious about history. I was very, as I was collecting things as a child, I was also listening to stories of my grandparents about their own past, what they went through. For me, it was just, I was very curious to meet Germans. It's something that I was very curious about, that are my age, and to hear from them what they heard from their grandparents, if they heard anything from their grandparents. Not that it was really just very pure curiosity. It was really just an excitement of something that I want to know. I want to be able to speak German. I want to understand a bit more what is Germany today. And so I moved here to study, and not with the plan that I will stay for the rest of my life, but it was just an intuitive decision of like coming here and spending some time here and understanding slowly. If I find some answers, I mean, all of these things are completely theoretical, all of these ideas. So it was just, I would say, some sort of a curiosity to try to understand a bit more.
Yes, and then last year this book was published?
Yeah.
Which you brought.
Yeah.
Which also, for me, in a way, captures this possibility, but also impossibility of a certain theme or topic or research or notion even, in this case the Jewish garden.
Yeah.
So how did you, in the end, come with this?
Yes, so this is a very bizarre story. So there is in Marzahn, in the east of Berlin, some sort of a strange attraction park that is called the Garten der Welt, the Gardens of the World. And it's a compilation of different gardens, of different traditions of gardens from around the world. There's a Japanese garden, and a French garden, and an English garden, and people are going there to spend time with their families or with schools. And a few years ago, the Senate of Berlin and the Ministry of Culture of Germany decided that they want to build there a Jewish garden, which is a thing that does not exist. There is no such a thing, there is no such tradition as the Jewish garden.
Like the French garden.
Exactly, there is no visual, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But it was important for, it's part of the crazy and complex, not crazy, the very complex politics of Germany and Jewish themes in Germany. And so it was a project they wanted to do. They knew that there is no such a thing as a Jewish garden. And therefore they decided to have this competition between different teams of landscape architects to come up with ideas. And the team that won this competition is Kun Malvetzi, that are doing cultural institutions, and Le Balto, that are landscape architects that are doing gardens for cultural institutions. And together they came up with this idea to create some sort of very complex set of roads, that the Jewish identity is a very complex one and an anti-hierarchical one, and you cannot have too much order in this thing, and you need roads that will lead you to dead ends, and you will need to they had an idea. And part of their suggestion, part of their project was that if indeed they're being selected, they need research of 2 years for choosing what plants to plant in the garden. And then they won, and they invited me and Hila Peleg, the curator, and Ilan Shev, the artist, to come up with a concept for the content of the garden. And we were horrified by this invitation because it doesn't make any sense. No, in general, the idea of
meant literally
to choose like names of plants, and so we tried to think how we can somehow bypass this thing, like how not to end up in a situation of the plants from the Bible or something like that. And our idea was to create some sort of a literary index in the form of a garden, so that each plant that is in the garden is a literary reference. So that you would walk between like a rose that is from a poem of Heinrich Heine, and then there is like a strawberry bush that is from a short story of Benjamin Metudelo, of a writer from Spain from the 13th century, something that is really anti-hierarchical in the sense of like many geographies and many different periods, and biblical texts are not more important than poems from the 21st century, so some sort of a real index of literature that is just physical, that you are walking in between the pieces. And so we started to work on this thing. Very, very quickly it became clear that they are very unhappy with our work.
They, meaning the architects? Or
no, the architects we were together with them. No, the commissioners, the Senat of Berlin, the Allianz and Axel Springer were the funders. And we were for them too political. They accused us of politicizing the garden, which we were not doing, but this was the accusation. And they had very crazy, I'm getting a bit into too many details of this, but they had crazy arguments that, for example, we had Rosa Luxemburg in the garden, and they claimed that she was not a Jew, she was a communist. So she's known as a communist, and therefore she doesn't have a place in the Jewish garden, which is a crazy, so not very quickly, but after some months it became clear that it's not working, and we were not interested in being told by them like, okay, this yes, this you cannot, this yes. And at a certain point it a bit exploded, and we decided to not continue to work on the garden. And with all the materials that we collected, it was like 4 years of work of the material, of the literature pieces that we collected. We decided together with Hakaveh and with Hansa, with the Verlag, with the publishing house, to publish some sort of an actual garden in the form of a book, some sort of the opposite thing, because already we were in the idea of we're now building a physical garden, which is a translation of a literary index into garden. So now we were already in the garden thing, and we were trying to make it into a book. And the result is this very green
That's really
chunk.
It's really nice and fascinating, and of course full of surprises.
Yeah. So
because you did all this research into the text. You were just saying that you're going maybe perhaps too much into detail, but that's a bit your thing, I think.
No, I agree.
So you find micro, let's say you find stories, narratives, micro histories, and it's, I mean, you make it, I think, pretty specific, but at the same time it kind of alludes to something which is bigger, I think.
Yeah, I think that for me, the interesting thing about very, very specific, seemingly tiny details is that they actually reveal everything, like they contain in them, if we approach them correctly, or not correctly, if we find a way to approach them that allows them to somehow illuminate crazily big socio-political landscapes, or at least the realities in which they exist. So I think it's very telling that German representatives of the government told the 3 Jews that Rosa Luxemburg is a communist and not a Jew, and she cannot be part of the Jewish garden. I think it's a tiny detail in conversation, but it reveals an amazingly complex reality. And so I didn't think about it in those terms until that you were saying it, but I think, I like details very much because I find them powerful in a sense to shed light on everything, like on everything that is around us.
And in a way, this, just for 1 second, I think what's happening. It's, and again, I find it also interesting how your fascinations can be in a way about the past and the future at the same time. Also that this happened with the Rosa Luxemburg example, I would say. Almost like, maybe it was a little bit of a prediction of things that we are experiencing and observing now, but also, of course, things that happened in the past. Unfortunately. And I had to think, because you also said when we talked before that you helped your grandmother with kind of reorganizing all the stuff that she collected. And in a way, you and she already felt this has meaning, all these details like little grocery shopping carts and just like lists of things.
Yeah, so this is the thing that since I was a child with her, with my grandma, that is Zippora, that is mentioned here. So she was collecting everything, like as you say, really like supermarket lists from the 40s. She was having this thing, and it was important for her to make it clear to everyone who is not her, because she knows what these things are. So she wrote on everything, like a supermarket list from the 2nd of October 1942, like, for example, or on every photograph at the back, like from the left is this person, from the right is this person. On every photograph there was this information. And as a child, I would be with her, like there were piles of photographs, and I would sit and she would tell me, like, okay, so you're right. So this one on the left is this one, then on the right is this one. So when going over all her things, that I have many of them here in Berlin, it's also very funny for me because my handwriting is on all of them, but in different ages. So you can see the evolution of the ability to write.
But that's also a bit part of the index now.
Definitely, yeah.
That you can date it. Are there any questions? Because I think,
I was just didn't want to break this discussion because I found it interesting, but I was just wanted to ask something about the image that you used for the film, how that came to be. If you want to tell something about it.
Yes, so I picked. So this is I took this video from the window of an airplane with my phone. After I was given the box and started to read a few of the letters. And in one of them he's describing this thing that he was dreaming. He was above the Arctic, but he was not sure if it was actually clouds, and he thought he was seeing her. And there was a moment in I had the box with me, and I flew back to Berlin. And there was a moment I looked, and I really thought to myself, this is actually a bit like this thing of, can it be actually that the Arctic looks like that? I had like a moment of this strange thoughts, so I just started to film it. And at the beginning, it was not with an idea of making anything with it at all. It was like 2 years after that I decided to do anything with the letters, but this was some sort of an impulsive reaction to it. And at the beginning my idea was to keep it completely black the whole time. But I tried it, and slowly I felt that I want to create this a bit of floaty, dreamy situation, hovering feeling in a certain way. This is also the sound that is very confusing in a sense. It's many different things at the same time. So there are sounds of like wind, of rain, of snowstorms, of engines, of like chairs that are moving in the house. It was the idea of creating this a bit of a mix of like things that are happening in his mind, and then in the room physically when he is writing, and when we are watching the thing, end of the video from an airplane. So this thing of bringing all these things to somehow clash with each other. There are the sounds of frogs from time to time already from the beginning. So a bit like to play with different elements that are clearly very abstract and don't make any sense, the frogs at the beginning, but maybe somehow then when there is a frog, maybe there is a thing of like, maybe, can it be that I was hearing frogs before? Maybe.
When they talk about
when he's mentioning with this joke with the frogs and the joke of the dog.
Yeah.
So the idea was to create this thing of like some sort of a hovering thing that you're in the air, but not really, that it's still very abstract.
And it ends with the cable.
Yeah, and it ends with the cable car from Miyajima that he is also mentioning. And this was also because I was in Miyajima before I found the letters, so I took this video while I was there because it was just amazing, and all these things that he is speaking about, the deer that are walking in the island, and it was just crazy for me that I was reading his descriptions of Miyajima that they were there, I guess, at least 50 years ago, and so it made sense to me to use it in the end. And also this was coming, it's not explicitly, it's not he's describing Miyajima, so we see Miyajima. It's not maybe a connection that most people don't even do, but that you see in the end is cable car. But I like the idea of playing a bit with the present and past and future, also practically in the work of like, he was talking about the cable car from Miyajima, and there is in the background the actual person speaking like, thank you for coming for the Miyajima cable car. So.
Seems also like a place where they meet again, because that's also mentioned there. And this is, I'm just curious, where you mentioned more than the one time, the rice little bread Itamar?
Yeah.
But was it one time, or did you read it in more?
In the letters, it's mentioning many times. Everyone, it's very repetitive. The letters actually, they are very repetitive, and he's mentioning like I had lunch with Shlomo, and the letter after I had lunch with Shlomo, and the letter I had lunch with Shlomo, and it's very
Okay, it's a mark came by.
Exactly. It's very
Another question?
I was wondering if you have an idea where the obsession of your family comes from to document things and to sort of trying to remember things.
It's a very good question. I don't know. but clearly this obsession exists because people just keep everything. So maybe not everyone, but there is at least in every generation someone that is collecting thousands of photographs and documents and birth certificates and certificates from school. Like he actually, Isaac was also keeping ridiculous things from his school in Cairo that I have now in Berlin, like different notes from his teachers, drafts from poems that he was writing when he was 10, and I don't know, they were just keeping everything. I don't know. Maybe it has to do with immigrating, with living your past, like where you grew up, but you want to keep whatever you can from this thing of mentioning the names of everyone to some sort of a fight against forgetting.
I was just wondering if you have any guiding principles in your research process, just to keep yourself away from getting too much lost in all these details of micro histories and
so I don't really have like clear rules, but there are things that I'm really just getting excited about very intuitively, and that I have a feeling, okay, let's dig a bit and understand what is behind this thing. And sometimes after a bit, I'm realizing that it's not really, I don't know, I'm thinking of an example. Like last year I was in Istanbul for a few months, and I was reading about the fact that the Sultan in the 14th century really liked ice cream. And he had donkeys that are bringing for him snow from one of the villages in the mountains of Turkey. Every day there were donkeys bringing snow so that he could have ice cream. And I found it amazing and very funny, and I really thought, okay, this is really an amazing thing. Let's understand what it means. It contains everything, like it's everything that is in the world. But after a while of like reading a bit more and about these villages in the mountains and like the kitchen in the palace, of like I felt that it's not really going anywhere. So I put it aside. Maybe it will come back one day, like combined with something. But it's very intuitive. It's not.
Does that also go for your aesthetic choices? Because there are also, if you look at all the works, I think you could say something about an aesthetic that you have, but I'm not sure, like maybe you have ideas about this.
No, in general I can say that I like, just as I like to work with very obvious and established forms that are already immediately somehow recognized, and so I can play with the expectations a bit. I think that I'm also interested with this thing of some sort of beauty or elegance that are in a way very easily understood or very easily perceived as, okay, this is very clean, this is very elegant, and then when you're in the thing, you can start seeing the problems with it, like the problems with it being very elegant or very beautiful. Not this work specifically, but the installations that were here of the cocoons or the body parts, or again the idea of beauty that is a bit dangerous is very much in the black at CCTV. So the idea of something that is seemingly pretty or very easily, very sweet looking, but then when you are a bit trapped, I would say, in this thing that is very beautiful, there is space to try to understand what is here not working, or what is here a bit disturbing or not functioning. And at the same time, it is beautiful. It's not just a tool. Some things can be beautiful, and they are beautiful and good, that they are beautiful, but using beauty or elegance allows, I think, also to play with our expectations of beautiful is good, or I would say. you.